So now we're here. I guess you graduated the same time as me, right?
Yep.
About 3 years now we've been out in Los
Oh,
Angeles.
yeah, since 2017 we graduated, moved out here early 2018. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been a wild ride so far. I'm sure that you've had your ups and downs.
Oh, very
And
much.
I think that's a good thing to start out with is I was thinking about, just 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we were just college students with basically hopes of making a career in filmmaking or creating videos. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience, like of how that came to be for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think everyone has their own avenue. Um, when you're becoming a filmmaker, there's an interest that sparks your passion, and then you turn that into something further, right? You take that to the next step. For me, I always was a huge film fan. Like, I loved watching movies. But up to a certain point in my life, I didn't understand or know what having a career behind the camera would look like or what that even meant. And when I realized and learned about all of these things that happen behind the scenes and not just talent and all that, but the production side, that fascinated me. And I was like, wow, all this time I've been a creative individual, but I didn't know how to capitalize on that and turn that into making movies, and telling
Right.
stories, and all those things were going on in my head my whole life, but I didn't understand that my way of expressing that was through film until I learned how people do it,
Was there a
really.
certain point where you actually realized that it was a practical career? A lot of people are like, oh, you're going to Los Angeles to become a filmmaker. Good luck with that. But people
Uh-huh.
don't realize that, it's a legitimate business and there's a lot of money in it.
Mhm.
And whether that's branded content or entertainment, there are actual avenues that you can do long term as a career. And I think that
Yeah.
like over the past 3 years, you realize that and you realize that it's a real industry, not this like kind of hippy dippy made up avenue that you want to pursue. So
Absolutely.
was there a
Yeah.
point where you realized that it was legitimate, and when was that?
Yeah. So for me, there's 2 points. There's one point where I realized I had a legitimacy to the potential that I had skill wise, that, hey, maybe I can have, or potentially at one point reach the point where I have enough skills to make a real career out of this. And I think that was while I was in school, when I first picked up a camera and did something myself, and was hands on. I was like, okay, maybe I can be good enough at this to make it a career. And then when I realized that for me, it could be like a successful career, was when I got a chance to move out to LA area, Orange County, and get a full-time job. And with film, I'm sure you can attest to this. You learn by failure and you're thrown into the fire every single time, like trial by fire. So you're going to fail. And the only way that you come out of that and become successful and learn is through someone just being like, hey, I'm going to teach you some things, and then you just do it. And if you fail, too bad, but you learn from that and then you move on. So I
Right.
think when I first came here, going on shoots and opportunities I would get to be like head of camera department on a commercial, or even just rent a B-roll camera, and they use your shots in it, right? And they're like, and you're like, oh, hey, that's my shot. That's pretty cool. And then the better you get, the more they use, and at a certain point, they start giving you more responsibility. And
Exactly. Do
yeah.
you think that you had to sacrifice a lot to just get those first opportunities, like those first, like get your foot in the door type of opportunities? As far as
So
like, did you get really crappy rates maybe, or did what did you have to sacrifice to just get your foot in the door to get that hands-on experience? Because that's the most important part is just, you know,
right.
just getting your hands dirty.
Right, exactly. I think, yeah, you have to sacrifice a lot. And I think that you have to sacrifice a lot for a long time to get to that point. Meaning, I did jobs where I got paid nothing. I mean, talk about feature film getting paid $700 for like a month of work. It's like, or nothing, or doing work for free a lot of times, just to make connections, to get the experience. You have to sacrifice. And there's going to be times where you're like, man, when am I going to get paid, or when am I going to get the opportunity to have more responsibility or to do better or to do bigger projects? It comes, but you have to prove yourself. And through doing your free work and sacrificing over and over and over again, you'll make connections that will begin to trust you and realize your skill and your dedication, your work ethic. And from there, then that's how you build that, by networking through those people and just working really hard and understanding you're not going to come out of school or be in school and get a job that pays you $1,000 a day, right? You're going to work for free, and that's just how it goes. And eventually, through hard work, you'll prove yourself, and you'll get to the point where you can not worry as much about money and have a little more opportunity, a little more freedom to be creative on your own, to be a leader. And,
Yeah, exactly.
you
I
know,
mean, you talk about, moving out with little to no connections, or a potential company that might be interested in you editing or you running cam, or, just these little tiny tasks that they might give you opportunities for. I've personally had the experience of, being brought onto a production set, being like, hey, listen, we don't have any money to pay you, and also there, half of that is we don't trust you quite yet, we need to evaluate your
mm,
skill set. But how many of those opportunities have led to paid future opportunities? You know what I mean? Like, a lot of
almost all of
times.
them, right?
Exactly,
Almost
yeah.
all.
A lot of times you show up and you do the work, and they're going to call you back because they know that you're capable and you've proved it, and then that's when I
Mhm.
feel like my opportunities out here started to skyrocket. Was, you know this opportunity over here, down 3 months later, they need someone in that same department, they actually have a
Mhm.
budget.
Right, exactly, yeah. And you're building that trust. And I think every filmmaker has to go through that. And sometimes you're working with guys in the same boat as you, and everyone has their different path, but eventually, like you said, they'll come back around and you build this group of people who trust you and you trust them. And whether it's a guy who's a camera operator, an editor, a director of photography, a producer, a writer, all these people, you test it out, you basically do some work together, and if it works out well, then they'll come back around and have your back and say, hey, I want to bring you in this project, and you'll most likely do the same if that relationship is a good one. So
Yeah, I love that. So, in recap, the power of networking is essential, especially early on in your filmmaking career.
100%, yeah, and
Yeah,
it becomes more relevant the farther you go, right? So
exactly.
square one, all about networking. Moving forward, you just continue that, right,
Can
and
you can you
build
talk
it.
about any specific examples from your past that have led you to, now if you look back 3 years ago, I would have never guessed that we're making, decent livings in the most expensive state almost in America, right?
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
we've accomplished a lot in such a little period of time.
Mhm.
And still we have far to go, but what has your networking experience been like in regards to getting to this position we're at now, shortly after graduating?
Well, it's like a roller coaster, and I feel like just the industry and the job is that way. Um, it's so up and down all the time in terms of like who you meet, networking, and all this stuff, and like good and bad fails and
Yeah.
successes.
Sometimes it's like a roller coaster, and you're like, your harness doesn't quite click
Yeah,
in, but it's
yeah,
going anyway, and you're just like, oh, here we go.
yeah, and you're just like, oh crap, like
Yeah.
it's really, really good, and you're like something is gonna go wrong, and it almost always does, and then you just go with it, and you find a solution, and it comes back up. And I think that networking is probably one of the parts of the industry, at least to me, that is a little bit more of a gradient, right? So it's really difficult at the beginning in every aspect, especially networking, because you don't know anybody. And then through the hard work, where you might work for free, you might work for cheap on stuff that it might not be your cup of tea, right? You might be just doing things just to get experience. And if you are building your network from the beginning, the gradient, it's almost going from like white to black, or whatever you want to say, from nobody to you're eventually building this networking pool that's so full of all these individuals that you trust and that you know really well, and your creativity meshes really well together, and that will benefit you in the long run, because you're basically building a network or a team of people who are like-minded, right? Or at least you mesh well together. I mean, we both know some of the same people that we mesh well with, and some of those people are from school. Some of those people are people that they knew, right, that are out here. And that becomes so much more important, because eventually a lot of filmmakers, I know you and I probably share similar goals, is to become a leader or have your own like company, or just like kind of a leadership role, right? And
Yeah,
to have that, you have to have a network of people you trust, and you're slowly building that from square one, right? So there's people you have build and build and build until you have a group of people that you're like, okay, we're going to start doing bigger things and take that next step. And now I have a network of people who are my teammates who trust me, right? And
exactly. Yeah. And
yeah,
exactly what you said. I think at least we share that similar role because we like the positive effect we have on others, and we can do that through bringing opportunities to our creative network, and
exactly.
and so many people have done that for me personally, just
Mhm.
being very well experienced and bringing me on set to do something, right? Or they need an extra set of hands, and they're kind of opening this door of opportunity for me, and I want to do that for other people. And I think that's a really common idea in the production industry, especially when you get to know people
Mhm.
on a friend to friend basis in the industry.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that building those relationships is vital, because if you think about when you start, there are always people who take chances on you, because if you have no experience, anyone who's giving you a chance is purely out of, hey, this guy seems like he's a hard worker, he has a great attitude, he might not have the experience, but I'm going to take a chance on him. And like, that is how you get opportunity to further your career and move forward, because
Yeah.
people have taken chances on both of us, I'm sure, on multiple occasions. And
Yes.
then and then when we get to that point, people still take chances on you, but then you also are taking chances on others when you become or go into a leadership role, more or less, and then you're taking chances on others, right, who have less
Yeah.
experience,
I love
or you,
that.
yeah,
I
or
think
that you
that
might not know as well, right? If you don't know
ex-
someone as well, you take a chance on them as well, even if
yeah.
they're
And
experienced.
one thing kind of over the years that I kind of took a step back at and looked at on paper, I made a Excel sheet of everyone that I've basically connected with over the past couple of years of shooting stuff, whether it was free or paid or commercial work, doesn't matter. I made an Excel sheet, and all of a sudden I was going through all my contacts. I was going through Instagram, and I'm like, oh yeah, we worked on this project. And it just so happened I look at this sheet, and I had like 55 contacts. And
Hmm.
I was like, wow, like not only have I helped that many people in some aspect, now I
Hmm.
can, open up the door for them for different opportunities, whether that's starting my own production agency, a small production agency, or if a company were to approach me and I was either booked or something like that, or they just are looking for a different skill set that I specialize in, I could be like, hey, I know someone, and I can refer them to that. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
all of a sudden, after all these sacrifices comes a valuable network.
Right, absolutely. And and it works in so many ways, whether it's someone you want to bring on as camera operations or director of photography, or it could even be someone that might rent out equipment, right? Because we're at a point where we're not getting a ton of funding for things that we want to do with no creative restrictions, right? Things that you want to do that are like your passion projects. It's all about money, right? And if we're coming out of the pocket, knowing people that have nicer equipment that's more affordable, like that also plays into it as well, because then it allows you to take that next step and take the quality of your work and keep progressing, right? Because that's what we have to do to be successful. So DSLR cameras, right? Everyone starts with those. They're really accessible, they're really affordable, and they're great. But eventually you're going to have to take the next step, right? And you go into the cinema cameras, and there's like level one cinema camera, C100, stuff like that. As Sony was a Sony A7. It's like a kind of
A7,
like,
yeah. There's
just
like
like,
there's multiple different options after that, but that's when your connections come in handy, right? You might know
right.
Johnny Two Shoes down the street that has an Ari.
Yeah, or
And
like, yeah, or red or something
yeah,
like that, that you're just like, wow, that's a phenomenal camera. I can't afford to buy it, but he's willing to let me use it for a really cheap price or something that's like a buddy deal.
yeah.
And then
Your
that gives you an
network turns
opportunity.
it. I think like this is one of the one of the most prominent industries where favors between different creators is like the most valuable currency, right?
It
Like,
is,
oh, I
yeah,
got a buddy
yeah.
that has a lighting kit. Like, he'll give it to us for $50 a day. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes, yeah, and you would never find that. And the lighting kit's like $1,000 at
right,
least, right? Just for like 3 little lights, and you're like, well, I couldn't have bought that right now. Like, there's no way, because you
exactly.
gotta pay for
Yeah,
crafty or whatever.
and then rental houses are used to
Yep.
charging corporate budget rates, you know, and you're like, oh, well, I'm just this little guy. How do I power through all this? You know,
Yeah,
it's your network.
it is all your network, right? And that is part of the concept, that it's not just the pool of people that you are building, but the opportunities you're given as well, like through that network. And that includes like equipment rental, position filling. Like, I know we shot a short film, like, was it 2 years ago or like a year and a half ago,
Man, it doesn't
all
feel
off of
that long ago.
favors.
Yeah,
I know
exactly. That's how
there
you
was
have
like,
to do it, right?
yeah, because I didn't have enough money, and everyone took a chance on me, and like, I remember that. So if anyone ever comes to me in the future and they ask me for something, I will always be open to that, whether or not they've done something for me, because I know that we all have to help each other out in the network. And without that, it's really difficult to move forward past a certain point. Because when
Yeah,
it comes down to it, it's either about money or it's about networking, or it's both, right? So,
right.
and the
Can you talk
networking
a
can make
little
it
bit?
easier.
Can you talk a little bit about balancing the whole making money side to afford rent, to basically survive in such an expensive state, but also having the creative passions to work on your own projects and all that? And how do you balance that?
Right. That's a great question. And that's to me, I'm because I feel like some people have told me that I have very like distinct style, and it's like real like out there. And that's a great question, because when you're doing commercial work is a good example. Um, to be able to do your passion projects and have the creative freedom, a lot of the times you have to make money elsewhere in order to fund your own projects that you want, right? Where you're kind of like the head guy and are the final say. Um, so I guess if it were advice, or just from my experience, you're going to have to do work for money where you are not compromising, but you are doing it to be able to fund things that are your passion. And most of the time I'm passionate about everything I do. It doesn't matter where it's from or like what the project is. I'm always 110% in. I'm passionate about every step of the process. I care about every part of every single piece of content. Like, and it drives me nuts in a good way.
Right,
but
right, right.
but those things are important because you learn from doing those projects, and they allow you to you're giving yourself the opportunity to take a step in whatever direction you want to outside of those projects, where you have your main money flow. And once you get
Exactly.
that nailed down, then the opportunity is endless, because you can do whatever you want. And
Right.
you're going to fail over and over again, and you're going to be like, oh, this is difficult, and do I pay my utilities or do I use a credit card? I don't know, but I have to get this other project done that I'm doing on the side that I'm paying for. And you
Yeah.
got to find a way
You
to
have to
keep the money coming
sacrifice you have to sacrifice a lot to build your portfolio too, because
in.
when you're
Mhm.
constantly brought in on other projects, even if they're just your friends' projects that don't exactly mesh with your style that you're trying to create,
Mhm.
investing in your own work that you're in control of, that you want to develop long term, you know,
Yeah.
that's a huge part of it. And I think that, I mean, we're all still learning, but I have really dove into trying to develop my own style outside of all of the work that
Mhm.
is brand work or paid commercial work. You know,
Right.
you almost have to develop your own style, and you have to sometimes financially invest in that too.
Yes,
uh, can you
absolutely.
speak
All the
to
time.
the importance of developing? You said you had a very unique style of what you like to do. uh,
Yeah.
Take me through that process of how you have been exploring that.
Well, that's a great question. I think that when you are doing the projects that basically are your money flow, or they pay the bills. You are collaborating with a team of people that have a very different backgrounds from you, most likely, and it's just a concoction of minds coming together to create something really amazing, and you learn a lot of lessons there. And the importance of developing your own style is taking what you learn when collaborating with others, especially in like the commercial industry, people who have a lot of experience, and just absorbing everything like a sponge on every project. You absorb technical lessons, you absorb creative lessons, like down to how you want to shoot a dialogue scene. I mean, you learn those things even in commercials, and taking that and then taking like your personal, the way your brain works and what you want to make. Like everyone has those two avenues. It's like what you, if you had no restrictions and money wasn't a thing, like budgeting didn't matter, what stories would you want to tell? And like that's how I think of it. I'm like, if it budget was nothing, if I could have any equipment I wanted, any crew, and I just had like money wasn't an issue, what would I want to make and how would I want to make it? And how is that going to convey like who I am as a filmmaker or a creative to everyone who's viewing it? And how would I connect with them to get them to understand what I'm saying? And I
Yeah.
think that's how I start with those passion projects and like narrative structured films.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazing perception to have. And one note I definitely wanted to highlight is, taking those things you learn on set through commercial works and absorbing them like a sponge, I think is what you said. And that's
Yeah.
perfect because in so many ways, you can take that information and those lessons you learn on set, no matter what the project is. If it's like a dentist office shoot or, like a Coca-Cola commercial, it doesn't even matter. If you're absorbing all these little skills and you know how to practically implement those into your side work, then all of a sudden the quality of your side work starts to skyrocket.
Absolutely. And you learn different things from every project. It's so crazy. I've shot a lot of stuff with motorcycles, which is like probably one of the biggest clients I've worked on. The things I've learned from that world and shooting things like that, those things have skyrocketed because of that industry. And then I've also done stuff like workout stuff, like the fitness industry, electronics, like they're all so different, but I took different things I learned from all of those sets and all of those projects, and I was able to take the lessons I learned and implement them into my personal work. And a lot of it is, you don't think about it at the time, but a lot of the things you learn are things like practical processes and things like that where you can apply that to your personal work. It's not just the creative side, but it's also like how
Yeah.
producing runs and how to handle a shot list and how to handle a schedule and like permitting and stuff like that, where if you want to be a director or producer, like you have to understand all the technicalities that it takes to shoot something, and the budgeting and all those things are really, really important.
Yeah.
You
I
can't
think the
overlook them.
top two things I've learned about working in a corporate environment to produce films or commercial work was, one, budgeting, how to handle payments and all of that. That's super important. And then secondly, I would say the actual onset production workflow of, even as simple as you're doing an interview with a stranger that you've met before, how to communicate with them on set, how to get what you want out of the video and approach them in a nice way to convey that message.
Yes.
I always refer to when I essentially start asking questions if I'm interviewing someone for like a talking head type of thing. I'm always thinking about crafting the questions to give me the answers that I need to tell the story, right? So
Yep.
just
Yep.
little things like that I would have never have thought of before working on commercial work or things
Oh
of that
yeah.
nature.
Yeah. And it dives into like the journalism side of things sometimes too, is you are structuring your questions in a format where you're basically like leading people, or training them to give answers in a concrete way where they are stating the question and make sure that, hey, if I cut this line out and place it here, people will know exactly what they're saying, like use name reference, use company reference, like use complete sentences, part of the question and the
Yeah,
answer.
you learn how to make editors happy, huh?
Yes, exactly. Because when you go to the editing room, the less work you make them do in terms of like chopping and screwing and stuff like that, it just makes the process a lot more seamless, and you actually save money, because in editing, time's money, right? And it's actually really good money. You make a lot of money in post-production, maybe even more than shooting.
Yeah.
But
That's my little secret is a lot of people ask me how to make money in filmmaking, and I'm like, know a specialized technical skill, i.e. editing, and
yes,
you'll be set, because everyone needs someone on the technical side of stuff. Everyone wants to be a
yeah.
director, everyone wants to be a writer, but when you can have a technical skill that not a ton of people can master, that's a good fallback in case you ever need
Mhm.
jobs.
And I think also that's a really good point, because that can lead into the fact that if you want to be a director or a writer or producer or even a director of photography,
Hmm.
editing is so essential to that. If you can edit and you can visualize and edit while you're shooting or before you are, like in the pre-production, if you can edit and you understand what you want your edit to look like, that will give you such an advantage over others, because
Yeah,
you understand how things will come together. And if you can edit yourself, even if you're not the editor, it's like you can
exactly.
communicate
Yeah.
that. You get an advantage, like, because there are a lot of people who don't edit, and it's like you have to edit. You have to edit is probably one of the most important things, because if you screw something up while you're shooting, guess whose problem it is? Well, it might be the director, but you fix it in post. Like, it's the editor. The editor is like your saving grace, and that's what makes everything come together.
So essentially, shooting for the edit can speed up workflows, make everyone's job easier, and a lot of the times can make the message resonate very clear and concise, where
Yeah.
you're not kind of constructing little bits out
Yeah.
of a scramble of shots in post production. I think
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
that that was one thing that actually, I'm glad I started as an editor, and I still am an editor for a lot of jobs, but it's making me shoot better. It's making me shoot commercials
Mhm.
better. It's making me shoot anything I do better, because I know how the process works in post production,
Mhm.
and you know exactly what kind of shots you need to get in the pre-planning department, before
Yeah.
you actually make it happen, and it speeds everything up.
Oh yeah, you save time, you save money, and it makes you a better director of photography, writer, producer. If you are a good editor, you have an advantage over others if you are doing one of those jobs, right? A director of photography who is a good editor, you have such an advantage, and that's something I actually learned from the past 2 years here. Was I came here and I had okay like camera skills. A camera operation was probably my most solid skill coming here. I took so much time and did so many projects to hone in my editing craft. And once I did that, then I was able to excel as a camera operator, director of photography, excel as a director. Like, that propelled me to the next level. And without becoming a good editor, I don't think that I would have come this far this quickly at
Yeah.
all. And I think it's so vital. And I would emphasize that for people who are just getting into it, or even in our position who might not be like into editing. It's like
Right.
this will push you forward. You will go to the next level if you can become a skilled editor.
Yeah, I think it goes all around the block too, in terms of
Mm,
production positions. I would definitely emphasize, put a pin in editing, because editing is essential to learning how things come together
right.
as, your storytelling. But also, just the more well-rounded you can be on production sets, the more you understand the logistics of how it all comes together. Like
Yes.
taking a role as a gaffer, or
Hmm.
I did one gig that I was a DIT, which is basically I was in charge of on set, like getting the SD cards and dumping all the footage, categorizing it and
Hmm.
organizing everything, and starting basically the post production workflow correctly. And I
Yep.
never would have thought that A, I didn't even know that was a real position until I got out here. But
Right.
B, now like I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, that's a really essential thing if you have a tight turnaround,
Mhm.
you know? So the
Right.
more well-rounded you are in all all facets, what's the word? The more well-rounded
uh,
you are, let's take it
right.
back to
Yeah.
that, the better.
Right.
Love that.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it does. You're right. It does go both ways. Like, if you are already a good editor, like, guess what? Study lighting, because lighting is insanely important. If you don't have great lighting skills or have someone who has taught you those things, guess what? Visually, like, it makes a big difference. If you can be a lighting artist, like, you have already taken half of director photography out. Like, it's lighting and it's camera work, right? And you're working with the director to do, there's other things when you get to higher levels, like worrying about, like, I guess, like, you get into the specifics, lenses and types of cameras and how you're shooting it, like what camera you're using, what's the sensor look like, how are you going to color grade it? It's all these things come together, but at a basic level, for those who might be like listening to this, lighting, camera work is where I think that you should start if you want to be in like director photography work. Lighting is super important. I got lucky when I was in school and I was exposed to a project that I got to be hands-on with, like feature film, like cinema level lighting with a bunch of Aries and like the old lights, Jokers, stuff like that, Aries sky panel, like stuff like that, that I would never ever get to touch, like for years and years. But the fact that I got the opportunity, I learned so much, and it gave me an advantage, um, visually at least, over other people who might not have had that experience, right? And
Right.
then,
To understand the equipment and how to
yep.
use it to achieve a certain look.
Mm.
And the other side of that is, you know, as a director of photography, you'd be talking to the director on like, what's the goal of this scene? How do we want to make it feel like?
Right.
And that's your job to translate that to the camera department and lighting department.
Mhm.
Uh,
Exactly. In technical terms, it's real important, because if you have the lighting down and then you go into camera work, you're going to be in real good shape. And then that also, for what we were talking about before, once you have those skills, that will allow you to develop your own personal style really well, really well. Once you have the understanding of lighting, camera work, and get into it, the director, somebody who's thinking on like another level, not just technically, but with talent, storytelling, like delivery with talent, a lot of different things
right.
that all come together, that gives you an advantage when you can kind of like bring all those things together and create your own style. And then people will recognize your work and say, oh, that's Andy did this video, like, I can recognize your style as someone who knows you, and it's great, and it's you. And like, there's no apologies for that. You're like, this is me. Here's what my vision looks like, and take it or leave it, and you love it, and everyone else is going to love it too, right? Because you're
Right.
just like
And I think
unapologetically you.
yeah, I love that. Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think that like branding yourself to a certain style kind of differentiates you in a way for down the road. If someone were to approach you and you have kind of a mixed bag, which a lot of different people in production have, it's like, oh, well, I did a comedy over here, I did a horror film over here, and you're kind of this mixed bag of randomness in your resume.
Mhm.
Like, it's good experience and everyone has to have those different experiences, but what you're shipping out, I feel like, has to be what you believe in and well packaged in a sense of, you know, it stands alone. Like, this is Andy's work, this is Joe's work. Like, I'm a brand or I am a producer for
Right.
a feature or a show, and I'm going to approach these individuals because of that kind of brand that they've developed over the years, which is
Yes.
unique, right?
Yes. Very unique. Yeah. And creating a personal brand, and it doesn't have to be like slap a sticker on it and here's a t-shirt, like, kind of brand. It's your style. Like, when people look at your work, what do you want them to like think or feel? Like, you want to convey yourself through your work, right? Say, hey, here's my film, here's my music video, here's my commercial, right? This is me. And you want people to look at it and be like, hey, that's Joe, that's Andy, and you have your own style and your own interests,
Yeah.
and
It
And
takes
this,
time too. It takes a lot
yeah,
of time.
and we neither of us have reached our like full like baked in style, you know, even when we are way ahead in time, way more experienced and have way more skills in the bank, we're always learning. We're always
Yeah,
learning every project.
it's a moving thing for sure.
Yep.
And I
And the
think
best of the best are still learning too. Like,
exactly. And that's called growth.
exactly. And you always have to be growing and you're always developing your style. You know, there's guys out there who have made rom-coms who might have made something completely different like 10 years later. Like, who really knows?
Yeah.
And we all have our like number one thing, you know, whether it's horror, crime, action, comedy. Like, we have a buddy who does comedy. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. And
Yeah.
he's like super talented and super passionate. And he's got this like really unique style. And every time I watch something of his, I love it. It's great. And like,
Right.
that's unapologetically him. And
Yeah,
like,
but you could also have him work on your horror film too.
yeah, which I did,
Sharing
right?
resources, sharing
Yeah.
resources.
And he did
Love it.
great. And
Yeah,
I'll work with him again whenever the time comes. But it's like,
love it.
yeah, using the network and, you know, having your own style is real important, and do what you want to do. You know, like
Yeah,
my biggest piece of advice, if you want to become a director of photography, a writer, an editor, like whatever you want to do, just do things your way. You know, it's going to be hard. There's going to be times where you don't know what's going to happen. It's uncertain. And you know what? It's not always easy. It's actually hard more times than it's easy. But as long as you keep going, you keep fighting, you keep pushing, you eventually will understand that, you know, you can do things your way and you can be successful, and you just have to work really, really hard and you'll get there. And you have to network and, you know, just work your butt off like
yeah.
24/7. I mean, there's weeks where you work straight through the weekend and you don't even
And
think about it.
at some point, it just becomes your normal. Like a lot of times on the weekends, I get excited to work because it's my work.
Mhm.
You know, it's
Yes.
not anyone else's. It's my time, and that's when I really like just buckle down and get after it.
Yeah, and it's a lifestyle. It is a profession. It is a career. It's a passion, but most of all, it is a lifestyle. And if you take it seriously, like that, I mean, that's your life. Like, you can do anything else you want. You have hobbies and stuff. Filmmaking is a lifestyle, and it will never change ever,
Yeah,
as
I
long as
love
you're in it.
I love that point because one thing that shifted in my life was working hard for different things that I didn't want to do.
Mhm.
And I took a step back and kind of questioned that and said, you know, what would happen if I worked really hard for things I actually care about? You know what I mean? Because you're going to be working hard in life regardless, right? So
Right. Yep.
why not pick something that is, you know, a little less practical than a suit and tie
Mhm.
finance job, but still
Right.
realistic? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
Very much so.
if you dedicate your time and energy over a extended amount of time, then
Mhm.
I can tell you basically 3 years only into my career that good shit will happen.
Yes, good shit. Good shit will happen, absolutely. And I think that it is scary. It's a scary thing to get into because it's so unconventional. It's technically an art industry, so you know that's hard within itself, and especially out here, it's very competitive. People will be fighting for your job. I mean, it doesn't matter where it is. There are filmmakers everywhere, and it is competitive, it is cutthroat, and it is not easy to do. But like you said, you work hard, you focus, you show like your work ethic, your potential creative ability, and it actually is like collaboration is real important as well. And collaborating with others that, you know, everyone has their own vision, their different process, their different style, but collaboration is very important because that is where you learn things, where you further your networking, and it's also where you can develop your style too in ways you didn't know before. Like, you're not thinking about it, but if you're collaborating with others who have way different style or similar to yours, like, you're always learning something from them, and you can
Yeah,
hone in on your craft and take the next steps as well. And I think
that's
that's a big
awesome.
thing. Yeah.
100%, man. Well, we've been talking a little bit. I kind of want to wrap it up here soon, but before
Yep.
we go, is there anything that we missed in this discussion that you would tell your previous self 3 years ago? Or is there anything that you would tell to aspiring artists, maybe considering moving to Los Angeles? I would say it doesn't really matter where you are, but
Mhm.
what would you say is the most important thing you've learned over the past 3 years to someone that's maybe just dabbling?
Yes, I think to all the younger filmmakers out there, whether you're getting into the film industry or my former self or Andy's former self, a good message would be follow your dreams. Really, if you're going to do this, make the decision and do it 3,000%, not like way over 100%. Just work really, really hard, be yourself, do things your way, but also understand that if you work really hard and you have an open mind and you're collaborative and you are unapologetically yourself, an individual, good things will happen. And those things lead to furthering your networking or networking in general. Getting more opportunity is everything, and people will take chances on you. So I would just say to anyone who's listening or interested in doing this, it is very intimidating. We all felt it at one point, and we still do. Just like if you really want to do this and you have passion, please like do it, and just do not be reserved at all and go all the way in and have and no exception, just no apologies. Go 110% and just use everything at your disposal to get to the next level or just get into the industry, and good things will happen. And I think that's about it, honestly, for the younger
Love it.
guys and girls. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Commitment, man.
commitment, exactly. It's a lifestyle, and you will learn that very quickly.
Yeah.
But it's very rewarding at the same time, despite all the stresses and the roller coaster. When there's a success there, it is more. It's very gratifying. It's a
Yeah.
life changing thing when something is successful.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
No, I would never have it any other way, and I don't think I ever will. I think that we're in here for life, and
Yeah.
a lot of people will see that coming down the road, or future filmmakers will understand that at some point. Like, hey, I'm in it, and I'm never gonna get out.
Yeah.
So,
And if anyone actually listens to this and comes out, come say hi.
yeah, come say hi. I'm sure
Yeah.
my Instagram or information will be on here. Same with Andy. Like, reach
Yeah.
out. We're always willing to help younger people or give advice or just try and help people network too. I know people and Andy knows people different places, and we're always willing to help people out and try and help you exercise your passion or explore that at least. And that's real important.
Absolutely. Awesome, Joe. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time, and we will hang out very soon. I
Yeah,
promise.
absolutely. Thank you, Andy. Thanks for having me, and have a good Sunday.
Yes. You too, dude. See ya.
All right. See ya.